Hi there, I'm Alex Stoddard and I'm an American photographer based in Los Angeles, California. And I'm here today in Berlin at Geistesblüten for my very first European solo exhibition. We're showing about 30 different pieces which are a culmination of different photographs that I've created throughout my career of 13 years, as well as a number of images for my first photo book, INSEX, which was published by Kerber Verlag here in Berlin. I wanted to walk you through some of the images that are featured in the exhibition and explain a little bit about the making of and the stories behind them. So I thought that we would start here with this picture called Migration, which is actually the cover of my debut photography book, INSEX. So I wanted to go with something that was a little bit ambiguous for the cover of the book. The series features a lot of pictures of people and insects and kind of the process of metamorphosis that insects go through as a metaphor for coming of age in humans. So I thought this was a very mysterious kind of picture to put on the cover that kind of would invite the viewer into the book and give them just a little bit of a taste of what they were going to find inside. So when you come into Geistesblüten, you're going to see that the exhibition starts with a series of blue pictures, and a lot of these were created around the same time period, and this was a time when I was creating in a very blue color palette, which I think you'll probably know a lot of artists tend to go through a blue period, whether that means that they were sad or feeling a little cooler or a little more melancholic. But these pictures were created between 2020 and 2022, and this was just a time when I was really drawn to these deep blues and this sense of peace and mystery within the night sky. Often I've been compared to Magritte with some of the portraits that I create around like blue, cloudy landscapes and the presence of a moon in the frame. One element of my photography that has remained largely the same since I started is self-portraiture. And I've always been inspired by creating images that reflect a sense of myself by putting myself in front of the frame and embodying the characters of the story that I want to tell. So this is an image called Face Off, which is inspired by a classic still by Eduardo Guerrero, who's a Spanish photographer and director. And in it, it's actually a double self-portrait, so both of the figures are me. And I wanted to depict myself kind of in a face-off stance with myself kind of facing off against the other figure. And it was inspired by kind of wanting to confront the parts of myself that I didn't like and that I wanted to almost kill off and battle. And so you see the two figures of me in the frame, and you kind of just see them interlocked in this moment of drama and high tension, and you don't really know which one to root for. You don't know which one is the enemy, which one is the good guy. And I kind of love just this very dramatic perspective that I achieved by shooting from within the four figures' legs and seeing both of the figures kind of facing off in the same stance. This corner of the show features a few pictures that I created with one of my friends and a muse of mine named Finn Argus, who is an American actor. For this shoot with Finn, I wanted to create images that had a very painterly aspect to them. I thought they had a very angelic, almost cherub-like look, so we created these images that give them almost like an angelic essence. I also worked with Finn on the cover art for their first single, Exposure, off of their new EP. For the shoot, it was a really fun process of going out into the wilderness, just Finn and I, and dragging this giant TV out into the woods to have Finn kind of crawling out of and emerging from. And it takes a lot of inspiration from the music video that they created for the song Exposure, because it features kind of a figure emerging from this world that is so encapsulated in technology and social media and being on so many people's screens constantly, back into the natural world where I feel like humans belong. And it gives this cool kind of like juxtaposition between the technology and the natural world. This is a pair of self-portraits titled Crossing Over, and it's actually a recreation of a famous painting that you might recognize called Escaping Criticism. And I really loved just the meaning behind that painting, that the subject is coming out of its frame and emerging into the real world. And I love this idea of kind of crossing over from one realm to another and kind of coming from this fantasy land of a painting into the real world. And this was a fun shoot to do because it involved actually building the set myself. And aside from the photography and the styling and actually being in front of the camera, I actually loved also being in charge of the set design and the production design. And I built this set myself, and I wanted to have it be a really like physical space where I could physically emerge from the painting, and I didn't have to rely on Photoshop to achieve the effect. So I built this set in my backyard from a bunch of scraps of things that I just had lying around. And I'm all about creating images that look expensive but are done in a very inexpensive way. So all of what you see in the picture was things that I got for free off websites online or scraps of things that I had lying around, and I was able to build this set that looks like it's actually in a house or maybe a museum, and the figure in the painting is emerging out of it. This is one of my favorite pieces that I created for the series INSEX, and it's called Morpho. And it is a self-portrait that I took in a studio environment featuring several real snails. And usually when I am working with an element like animals, it can either go one of two ways. I can use like stock images that I find online and put them in so they're not actually a part of the real shooting. But when I can, I like to incorporate the real life elements. So these are actual real snails that I placed all over my body. And what I love about this picture is the way that I was able to kind of mimic the shape of the snail with my body. And that kind of plays into what I like to do with my work in showing the similarities between the human form and the natural world around it. And so by mimicking the shape of the snails, I felt like I was almost blending in with the rest of them. This is an image called Captive Breed, and it is a self-portrait that I created in 2021, and I always kind of call it my COVID picture, because I created it at the height of COVID-19 when everyone was kind of confined to their homes and their apartments and no one was able to leave. And I kind of see it as a representation of each person kind of being contained within their own little bubble, their own little socially isolated bubble, and but we're all pressed up against each other, and we can all see each other, but we're separated by, you know, these panes of glass or the walls of our houses. So it represented this time in my life when I felt like I was like trapped within my own little bubble, but I could see everyone else in their little bubbles as well. This is an image called Ready to Move On, and it's actually my own personal favorite image that I think I've ever created, mostly because it has the most personal meaning to me. Long story short, the backstory of the image is that it is this figure kind of moving along the landscape, carrying all of these birdhouses that represent all of the homes that he has built within his life, and he's bringing along all of these little pieces of each home that he's built along the way as he's continuing on his journey. And I think it speaks to the idea of change and progress, and the idea that, you know, the only thing constant in life is change, and that we're always going to be going through these changes and moving along on our journeys, but we are going to be bringing along all of the homes that we've built in people and places along the way. I was lucky enough to have my image called Carry On be chosen for the cover of Geistesblüten magazine number 19. And this is an image from my series INSEX again, and it's a self-portrait that I created, and it's a little bit dark in tone and mood, but it has this kind of shining light that kind of comes through it with the meaning of it. It's supposed to represent this feeling of hope, and that there's always going to be this little thing, this little bit of magic that might, carry us along and propel us through life, even when we feel like we're at our most exhausted or our most drained, and we feel like we can't really go on. We can always rely on that little bit of hope to get us through it. Issue number 19 also features a self-interview that I did, 20 pages, featuring me speaking about how I started photography, what my inspirations are, and it also features a discussion with one of my friends and muses, Finn Argus. Finn is also one of my muses who I've worked with on a number of photo shoots, many of which are hanging here in the exhibition at Geistesblüten.
Thank you guys all so much for coming. Yeah, I'm super stoked to bring my work here to Berlin. It's my first time in Berlin, and I've only been here for a day, but I was already kind of thinking that I want to move here. It's such a cool city with such a cool vibe, and yeah, such an amazing space to share this work with you in at Geistesblüten.
Ich freue mich total, dass Birte Kräft und Anna Lefke-Vorbeck da sind vom Kerber Verlag. Ihr habt dieses wunderbare Buch INSEX herausgebracht, 2021 mit Alex Stoddard zusammen. Nach dem Buch und nach der Idee INSEX sind wir auch vorgegangen und haben uns diese Bilder ausgesucht. Das ist wirklich Alex Stoddard, das ist seine erste Soloshow in Europa und wir sind glücklich, dass wir sie hier in den Geistesblüten zeigen dürfen. I just told him about the magazine and the way we met, and that you agreed in a self-interview, and I told him this is like the most complicated discipline, like in a magazine, like to talk to yourself. And so, how did you come up with the first questions? Were these really questions you've never been asked before?
Yeah, it was the first time that I'd done an interview in that format, so I never really know where to start. I used a couple of the questions that you had kind of prompted, just very general things as jumping off points about inspiration and just kind of going through the journey that I've had with photography and where it's brought me and the kinds of projects that I've been lucky enough to work on. And then, yeah, we did a beautiful interview with Finn, who is an actor in Los Angeles, and he's someone that I've collaborated with on a couple of projects. Yeah, it was a great interview, and very lucky to have the cover spot on Geistesblüten mag.
We feel honored very much for granting us this cover. Thank you so much. Everything seems to be so, so natural.
I don't think life is that serious. I mean, we all go through changes, and the only thing constant in life is change. I didn't make that quote up. It's a very common quote. But yeah, that was something that I wanted to explore with my first book, INSEX, because I had always been afraid of change and kind of transforming from adolescence into adulthood, and just the uncertainty that always kind of like plagued me with like what I was going to do with my life or what was going to happen to me. So I wanted to just embrace it and kind of lean into the idea that we all go through transformation, and it's something that we should just kind of embrace rather than run away from or hide from. And so the idea of change, I thought, was directly tied to metamorphosis in insects and the natural world, and it's something that is common throughout all living things. Like humans aren't the only ones that change. Insects go through this process of metamorphosis where they transform from one state to another, and it can be this like really ugly and terrible and painful process, but then come out of it with something that's really beautiful. And I think that that can be true of so much of human life as well. So that was something that I thought was a very fertile ground for drawing a lot of inspiration from. And then I was able to kind of draw on a lot of inspiration from insects and wings and just a lot of the physical attributes and kind of play with the comparisons of the human body and its place in nature with the insect counterpart.
You grew up in Georgia in the very 90s, and it's sad that you like to spend a lot of time by yourself within the nature, and we went to the lakesides and to the forests, and some of these pictures you exhibit with us hint that we need to change lives also, and that you care for a green planet.
Yeah, I mean, I've always had this appreciation for the natural world. I was lucky enough to grow up in like a very beautiful, kind of untouched natural landscape. And when I was a kid and was a teenager, I didn't really feel like I fit in with my surroundings. I grew up in a very conservative area, and I felt like my personality and just who I was as I was coming into my own didn't really fit with the people that I was around. So I sought solace in nature and the woods and waterfalls and lakes, and just being by myself in these places that there wasn't a lot of judgment. There was just me and, you know, the plants and the animals. So it was a place of peace, and then a place that became very inspiring for me, just out of natural beauty. So yeah, I've always had this respect and this appreciation for nature, and that's why I always tend to seek it out for the backdrops in my photos. I find like a lot of peace and a lot of just camaraderie with the nature around me, and it's a good escape from life.
Walking aside of your pictures, one can tell many of them are self-portraits. And I'm sure this is why you attract these many people, because they like your work, they like your look. But why do you take pictures of so many? Why do you take so many self-portraits? Is this because you don't want anybody else to interfere with your work?
It's like a 5-part answer. It started because I was like painfully shy, and I was spending a lot of time by myself. So I was using myself as this subject. So initially it started out of necessity, really, but it became something that I learned to love, and I get as much expression now from being in front of the camera as I do from being behind the camera. It feels kind of like being an actor in a film, and I get to step into the role of these characters and really embody the different emotions or stories that I want my subjects to tell. So it's kind of like playing make-believe. So it's fun for me to be in front of the camera. But it's also become this way that I can kind of explore different parts of myself, and has become a bit of a diary for me. As I grow older, I can kind of look back at different points in my life and see the work that I was creating and see myself in the pictures. And it's a really beautiful way of remembering what I was going through at the time, or what was happening, and just the emotions that were very prevalent. So it also is a way of, it's very peaceful for me to take photos. I know a lot of these might look uncomfortable, like roaches crawling all over me, or floating in cold water a couple times with fish. So it might look like it is not that much fun, but it's a way of just like kind of escaping and having like a moment of peace to myself. And it is also just a more freeing way of creating, rather than creating with a big team all the time. I do quite a lot of commercial projects as well that require 10 to 15 to sometimes 20 people to be on set. And having so many voices and so many cooks in the kitchen and different opinions coming from different directions can kind of water down the creative process a lot of the time. So I feel like when it's just me and my camera, I'm getting the most authentic vision for whatever concept or story that I wanted to tell, rather than having all of these different opinions, and which can be beautiful and inspiring, but it just kind of warps the initial idea that I wanted to create.
But besides taking pictures of yourself, you take pictures of men, women, and you pointed out Finn over there, who's non-binary. And does sexuality influence your pictures?
Not always, no. I like to work with people who I do find inspiring and I feel like are affecting change in the world. Like Finn came out as a non-binary actor and has been a pretty vocal advocate for the place of non-binary actors in Hollywood. So when I can work with someone who is kind of affecting social change like that and being like a driving force for something like that, I'm all for it, and I find a lot of inspiration in that. But otherwise, a lot of the time it just comes down to kind of vibe and what people look like. If they fit a particular character that I want to create, then I'll work with them. But I'm not very discriminatory toward working with anyone. I like to display a wide variety of representation when I can. So with INSEX, I was seeking out a lot of different body types and ethnicities and having just a wider array of people to work with to express the ideas, which I think kind of came back to the whole idea that humans are like animals in nature and we're all the same, when I can use people who look different to all kind of display the same idea of humanity.
You just got back from Paris, even today, and you've been invited to Paris Photo, which is a biggie to all photographers, because like this is like an honor to be invited, and you've been invited because of a signing, and apparently you must have hit so many other photographers, and so what did you witness at this fair, and what did it feel like to be part of it?
Yeah, it was really cool. If you've never been to Paris Photo, I would definitely recommend that you go and check it out. It was my first time there, even though I've had work hang there with a gallery twice before. But just being around so many other artists who work in the same medium is so inspiring. And what I kept saying when I came away from it was I discovered so many artists that I didn't know about previously, because there are so many artists who create beautiful work and are showing work in galleries that aren't huge on social media, so a lot of us never see them. So I almost felt like I was discovering this like unknown to me batch of artists who have been creating for the last several decades. So yeah, it's a beautiful place to go and explore and just see a wide variety of art. And I was super honored to be able to attend and do a signing with Kerber, who published INSEX.
As I said before, I think your pictures are fabulous, and in German we say märchenhaft. And I didn't really know how to retranslate märchenhaft, because it stands for like fairy tales. Do you still believe in fairy tales?
Oh, of course. I think that might be the magic to my art, if there's magic to my art, and just the way that I try to live my life is that I try to keep like the kid in me still alive, and I try to live in a way where I still see a lot of beauty and a lot of magic in the world, and I have tried to resist letting the world harden me and make me soulless and sad.
Ist gar nicht so shy, und I just told him, well, they can walk up to you and they can ask you as many questions as they like, and if they're getting too close, I will hit him down. And
He told me this earlier too.
No, and we are so thankful you're here, and thanks for spending time with us. And maybe this is time for another applause, because these pictures are great.
Yeah, I guess I can take a couple questions, because I think so.
I have two questions, so
Sure.
I'm going to use one now.
Yeah.
I've been a fan for many years,
Hi.
like 7 years already.
Crazy.
Yeah. I'm not that much inspired by many photographers, but you are the one that ever stuck to me and always kind of made me feel something. So thank you, and it's very good to see you here.
Thank you.
My question, first, I will tell you what's my issue, okay? I kind of romanticize that kind of a chase for momentary rush that I get when I'm taking pictures. I do a portrait photography, and I usually base the photos on the momentary, rush. I'm just with the model. I get inspired a lot by the music, so that's a big part of my work. But we all know that photography is not only about the rush and the excitement, it's also like 85% of hard work and that background kind of work. So I just wanted to ask you if you have if you have this kind of, as you said, you find the solace by taking the pictures by yourself. Do you sometimes have this feeling like you are standing in front of yourself because you just don't want to do the background work?
People ask me sometimes, like, where do you get all the ideas for your work? And I say, like, that's not the, like, I have tons of ideas, that's not the hard part. It's kind of motivating myself to get up and create the work. But yeah, what a lot of people, I think, don't know is, like, taking the actual picture is, like, 10%, maybe 8% of the time that a photographer spends working. And the other 92% is, you know, sitting in front of your computer for long hours, all night long editing, or, you know, sending emails and getting no replies or tons of no's. And it can feel disheartening and kind of like, you know, hard to continue to motivate yourself to keep going. But I mean, I personally I love what I do, and that has always been what I have to remind myself and come back to, is that I started doing it because it was fun to me and it was something that I found joy in. So anytime that I kind of come up against like a roadblock where I feel like I don't want to continue to make new work, or it feels hard, or it feels like demotivating, I just try to revisit that sense of play that I always had when I started, and just realize, you know, it's not open heart surgery. I'm not saving lives with what I'm doing. It should be fun. It shouldn't be something that I just feel this oppressive cloud over me about. It should spark joy. And I think maybe the day that it stops doing that, I might move on to something else and try not to limit myself, because I think artists are artists and they can find creative fulfillment through a number of means. You don't always have to like limit yourself to just photography. If that's not what is inspiring you at the time, maybe you can explore something else creatively, and you can always come back to photography. Your camera will always be there.
Hi Alex, again, happy birthday, and I'm so happy that you were doing this show here in Berlin. I want to ask you, many of these photos seem not very easy to make, and have you ever found yourself in some challenging or maybe even dangerous situations while creating those?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I've said this in past interviews too. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna die doing something like this, and it's gonna get snapped on the camera. But yeah, it's I feel like putting yourself in uncomfortable situations can lead to some really cool art. You know, it's gonna lead to things that you don't see every day. But yeah, I get as much fulfillment out of the adventure and the living in the moment of creating the photo as I do with whatever I get on the back of the camera. And even if something doesn't work out, I always have this like cool memory, or like this cool situation that I was in, or, you know, if I don't come away with anything, it's still is okay because I have a cool memory, and maybe I can draw new inspiration from that next time, and I can learn from what mistakes I made the first time. But I'd say I only share a tiny amount of what I actually shoot. Maybe like a third of what I actually photograph ever ends up making it onto screens or books or anything. Not part of your question, but I think editing is very important in an artist's journey, is choosing which photos to put out into the world and kind of show people what your style and what your voice is, rather than putting everything that you make out, even if it isn't always your best work.
So my question would be, how do you deal with the trend of TikTok?
So I resisted TikTok for the longest time, and then about a month ago I decided to join it. And I think what I've seen is that, you know, different mediums to share your work are going to come and go, and different platforms are going to come and go. And I think the only way to continue to, you know, push on is to embrace them. And I've seen a lot of photographers do this in interesting ways, where they don't have to, you know, do a dance in front of the camera and lip sync. They can just kind of put their pictures into a video format and put it out there. And I've seen a lot of photographers find success with that. So I'm trying to remind myself not to be this old grandpa dinosaur that refuses to embrace the new technology, and just see it as a tool rather than something to kind of live my life around creating. I just continue to create the work that I want to do and put out into the world, and I just use TikTok or Instagram or whatever as a tool to put it in front of people rather than the other way around.
I wanted to ask a question before, but it was related to what was just asked. So I'm figuring out another question like in 2 seconds. How does it feel to you talk a little bit about like having all the memories from watching your past photos, but how does it feel to like seeing yourself also like getting older, because you have photos that when you started you were like 15 or something like that, and now you're like almost 30, so how does it feel, and how do you like vision yourself differently now before you started? Just I'm the only model that I have under air, so I'm like doing that, but now I look differently than what I looked before, so I have like to adjust. Or
I love the aging process when it comes to, I know you're not going to believe me when I say that, I like getting older, but I think it is such an interesting thing to explore with my art in particular, because I started when I was so young, and I'm looking forward to continuing to create self-portraits for the rest of my life and just seeing how different phases of my life impact how I portray myself and how I see myself. And I think I mentioned it earlier that I use self-portraits often as a diary to look back on and see what I was going through at the time. But I'm excited to someday be an old man and be in front of the camera and see what kind of stories I want to tell, and then be able to look back on all of the different years of my life and have this retrospective of all of these different years and the art that I was creating with myself over the course of my life. But like I said about my series INSEX is, change is going to happen no matter what. So rather than like run away from it and kind of fear it, I want to embrace it and see what beauty I can find in it.